Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Brian Berger, the editor of SpaceNews, and I'm pleased to moderate today's Launch Operators panel. We're joined today by the top executives of the world's leading launch service providers. With us here today are Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX President and COO, Tory Bruno, ULA's President and CEO, Arianespace Chairman and CEO Stéphane Israël, Blue Origin Vice President Clay Mowry, ILS President Tiphaine Louradour, and Ko Ogasawara, who is Vice President and Senior Chief Engineer for Space Systems at Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Everybody, welcome to the panel. Each panelist will have 2 minutes for introductory remarks before we dive into the discussion portion of today's program. I've come with some questions of my own for each of the panelists and for the group, but we've also allotted time for audience questions that will be read aloud by me. But before we get into that, let's take a few moments to hear from our panelists. Gwynne, I'd like to start with you.
Thanks, Brian. I'm obviously pleased to be here, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to folks watching. I would much have preferred to be in Paris. That's one of my favorite trips of the year. You wanted us to talk about the good and the bad. I think there was, the bad is pretty obvious. The pandemic has impacted everybody's lives tremendously. And so, yeah, I'll leave that there. Despite that, we've been able to continue operating, which is fantastic. We're launching at a pace that we basically our fastest pace yet to date. We should exceed, I'm knocking on wood, our total launches this year. In fact, we've flown 20 times. Our next flight is this weekend with a crew, 4 astronauts. Those are actually the worst launches to watch and work through. I'm thrilled with the videos on those, though. We've had great luck and success in the commercial marketplace as well as our government business. Far more than 80% win rate on our more traditional GTO and telecom missions. We've done really well in the rideshare market. I do think that's a really interesting and helpful new market sector, frankly, for all of us. I also think it's going to spur an additional economic activity and enterprise for all of our futures. So we're pleased to be doing well there. This was a pretty big year for telecom launches. I think primarily shifted because of the C-band activity. I think there was only 4 non-C-band related large GEO satellite deals done. So next year will be interesting. The one good that could have come out of this pandemic is the insatiable demand for bandwidth. And so hopefully that will allow more telecom operators to think about new satellites and new businesses. We're sticking with the Falcon family, Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy, of course. We are starting to look towards Starship as a new and exciting opportunity for launch. The flexibility and hopeful dramatic decrease in cost, I think, will be really helpful for our customers, especially in such tight marketplaces. I think I've talked about it. So the GEO deals, the telecom deals, the rideshare is great, and the Falcon family is still alive and kicking, and we are certainly looking forward to flying some Starship missions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwynne. Tory?
Thanks, Brian. Before I start, though, I just want to say thank you to World Satellite Business Week for persevering, making this panel happen despite all of the challenges presented by COVID. So well done. And my compliments to all my colleagues. I do, as Gwynne does, look forward to seeing all of you in person in Paris. Next year, we will shake hands, not virtually. Gwynne, Godspeed and congratulations on your upcoming crew mission. Our thoughts and prayers are with you and the crew. So likewise, good and the bad. The bad is, of course, the pandemic. It has had an impact on our industry. Fortunately, I think we have shown the resiliency that our industry has. We have persevered through this at ULA. We have kept our people safe. We have met all our major milestones, helped our supply chain through it, and overcome all of that to maintain our continuing operations. In terms of the good, we're thrilled to be selected by SES for a important commercial mission. We're very excited with the United States government Phase 2 national security win, and looking forward to working with Gwynne and her team as part of the national team that supports national security for the United States. We're pretty excited to have more than 30 Vulcans sold already, not even having flown the first one. That surprised us and probably exceeded our expectations a little bit. The progress of the rocket is doing great. We have several flight boosters in the factory now, receiving some flight-like BE-4 rocket engines any moment now that will go under the first booster for flight readiness firings and pathfinding operations at the beginning of the year out of Cape Canaveral, so pretty darned excited about that. And the rest of the rocket is sort of in qualification testing as well as production fab. So I think I would just end with that all of us have persevered through this and shown the resiliency of this industry, and almost entirely because of the courage, the dedication, and the creativity of our people. And so hats off to all of them and all of you.
Thank you, Tory. Stéphane?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, for those who are in Paris, or good morning or good evening. Last time we saw each other, it was in Washington in March, just before the shutdown. So quite impressive, the situation we have been through since then. Again, I think Tory and Gwynne have said it. The bad is for sure linked to the pandemic for health of the people, and for our industry, let's say that it has slowed down some of our activities. For Arianespace, some launches will come later on. We know that we have had the shutdown of the CSG to protect the health of the population. We know as well that it has slowed down a little bit our activities when it comes to industry and the progression of Ariane 6 development, despite very important success, such as the third outfiring test for the P120C, which is a very important milestone. Maybe I will insist on the good. We have delivered 6 launches, and when we see what we have delivered, we see that we have delivered very innovative launches. With Vega, we have delivered a rideshare launch with 53 satellites, showing that we hit this market of nano, small satellites. With Ariane, we have delivered 3 GTO missions, and the last one has been a triple launch for the first time. We have had, as you know, 3 passengers, including an MEV passenger, showing also our ability to innovate. And when it comes to Soyuz, we have performed 2 launches for OneWeb. 53 satellites in a Vega, 3 satellites in an Ariane, more than 30 in a Soyuz. It shows that what we have done this year is really linked to the new trends of the market. Coming to the commercial, we have had a GTO contract with Intelsat in the C-band story, which is, I would say, partly open to Europe, and we have been able to sign with Intelsat. We have confirmed option with Eutelsat for Ariane 6. We announced today it's still undisclosed, a new contract, and we will say in a few weeks with the customer. So things have also progressed here. And again, now what will be very important will be the coming years. The coming years will be made of the end of Ariane 5 operation and the start of Ariane 6. And we are getting prepared for that very actively.
Thank you, Stéphane. Clay, you're up.
Hello, Brian. Hello, everyone. We certainly join my colleagues in saying that we miss everyone. We miss being in Paris and getting together as a community with the customers, with manufacturers, the finance and insurance community. We look forward to next year, hopefully getting back and seeing everyone. And Gwynne, good luck on Crew 1. Absolutely, Godspeed. So we're, I'm excited to be here this morning. We've been making good progress on all of our systems. Start with New Glenn, Launch Complex 36 down in Cape Canaveral, Florida. We've got that facility almost complete. Both the towers are up, our Lightning and our crew access tower. The water tower's up, the ramp is poured. Vehicle integration facility is now in place. So we're excited about that. We're making flight hardware in our factory down there, barrel sections coming out every day. We've completed 2 fairing halves, and we're looking forward to next year delivering a fairing to Plumbrook for full testing. Things are progressing well on New Glenn. We've signed contracts with 3 of the 6 largest geocomsat operators in the world, so we're excited about that as well. With respect to New Shepard, our smaller suborbital rocket, we just had our NS-13 flight where we tested some sensors for NASA for a lunar landing under their tipping point contract. It was the 7th time that booster flew to space and came down and landed vertically, which was a record for New Shepard, and we were excited about that mission as well. Tory mentioned a bit on engines. We've had good progress on BE4 and also on BE3U. We're pushing forward with those programs and getting ready for qualification, so we're pleased with that progress as well. Human Lander System is another program we're involved in right now, which is putting humans on the lunar surface, going forward to the moon, as my friend Jan Werner says at ESA. So we're glad and happy to lead the national team there. We've delivered mock-up hardware down at Johnson Space Center down in Houston, and we're excited about what's going on in that program. And finally, we built an engine factory in Huntsville, Alabama, that we took occupancy of in February with ribbon cutting. We're actually starting to make parts now in that engine factory down there. And moreover, we've got the 4670 test stand, which is the historic test stand where they actually built and tested, where they tested the F1 engines for the Apollo program. And we're refurbishing that facility and getting it ready for acceptance testing of BE4. We're also testing the BE7 engine down in Marshall. So good progress so far, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Clay. Tiphaine, let's hear how things are going for you.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you first, Brian and Rachel, for moderating this panel. I'll echo some of my colleagues and a shout out to Euroconsult for their amazing coordination and working with everyone, I believe, in setting up this conference in these challenging times. So thank you to the team. And I think that's something we've seen across all our interactions is just greater collaboration. We're in this together, and understanding that has really been helpful. I'm excited to lead the ILS team as its president. It's our sole focus is on the international commercial launch services market. I was born and raised in France. I live in the U.S. I'm a U.S. citizen. I work for a U.S. company representing the Russian space industry, and I was. I don't know where else you can have this type of worldwide mix, and then of course our worldwide customers. So I'm super excited and honored to be here with everyone else on the panel. So thank you for having me. ILS this year has really focused on some of its internal operations, streamlining, optimizing our operations. We've worked with our Russian partners to improve our partnership there through collaborative efforts and greater communication. I think a very good example of that when earlier this year, ILS announced with GK Launch Services a joint marketing and sales agreement that allows both companies to offer the full suite of Russian product launch services, the Proton, Angara, and the Soyuz launch vehicles. That will better allow us to address our customers' ongoing and I'd say evolving need, which is what we're seeing in the market. The different orbits, ride shares, constellations, and all those things. So having that full suite of launch vehicles, one-stop shop, will really enable us to serve our customer better, more flexible solutions, and of course known for our affordability. The other element I want to point out for ILS is ILS Khrushchev State Space Center and Roscosmos are really proud of having achieved 100% mission success over the last 5 years with 20 consecutive successful Proton mission flights. Results speak louder than words in some instances, and we believe this really demonstrates the outcome of the quality and reliability improvement program that started back in 2015. There were some issues with Proton then, and these are ongoing. There are ongoing quality initiatives so that, if anything happens, we catch it before flight. So those were important milestones that we wanted to share. We continue, of course, in the development of future launch vehicles. Angara 5, Angara 1.2 is starting serial production. And then in the near future, Soyuz 5, which will be a great complement to again, the overall launch service offering. So with that said, we're also actively re-engaging with our customers. And, one of the things of the bad of COVID, I think everyone's kind of talked about it. There also the and the positive, I'm not sure positive, but on the strong side is, again, really we've seen an increase in collaboration and partnership and seeing that no matter where you live, we've all been impacted by this. The Russian space industry is an essential business, so operations are ongoing. Obviously, there were modifications there, procedures, processes to ensure the safety and health of the workforce. The ILS team was set up to work virtually, and I think most of we work in any and every time zone to address customer needs. So that hasn't changed, but we are very much looking forward to having face-to-face meeting on a regular basis once again with our customers when they're ready. And obviously, I would love nothing more than to be in Paris with everyone, which is home for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Co, let's hear how things are going for MHI.
Thank you, Brian. I'm very happy to be here, and even in the COVID situation, I'm very happy to meet all of my colleagues here today. But just Tiphaine pointed out, I want to be in Paris next year and shaking hands with all of you. Because being in Paris is very happy for me to enjoy wine and dine. Big issue for me today is in Tokyo, all people are sleeping now. It's midnight, 0 o'clock. So my wife is sleeping in next room, so I should speak very quiet, okay? And good and bad. And good and bad for MHI, good point. Of course, 100% success launch in the last 12 months. The number of launches is not so big. We have launched 3 vehicles, 2 H2A, 1 H2B. And one of H2A launch is the commercial launch. We supported UAE to go after Mars. We did launch Earth Emirates Mars mission. That was 50th anniversary after foundation of their country. So we feel very happy. We could support their big dream to go to Mars. And as for H2B flight was flight number 9, the last flight of H2B. H2B is designed and manufactured for the support of ISS logistic mission. And the first flight was 11 years ago. And 9 flight successfully launched from Tanegashima Island, and we successfully supported ISS operation with our H2B launch vehicle and logistic vehicle HTV. That was good news for us. And after the launch of H2V, the launch pad was, H2V retired. And the launch pad is now under conversion into H3, a new launch vehicle launch pad. That is good news again. And bad news, as you know, the COVID-19 is bad news. And generally speaking, Japan is not heavily impacted, but looks like not heavily impacted by COVID-19. But we are now having big trouble in the daily lives, of course. And even now we do the telework, many people doing telework. And from business point of view, we did not have big impact from COVID-19, but we should recover for full business process. And another bad news is we have to delay our test flight number 1 of H3 because we have small trouble for engine verification process. So goods and bads for me, Brian.
Thank you very much. I do just want to stay on just COVID for just a couple minutes. And Stéphane, Arianespace was unable to access its launch facility this spring. It was temporarily closed out of precaution. In contrast to some of your competitors, yours is across the sea. I'm wondering, does that set up 2021 for Arianespace to be working off a backlog? And if so, should some of your customers be prepared for a wait to get their payloads launched?
But in fact, not really, because some of the launches which have not been delivered in 2020 are the following. We have not delivered some launches for OneWeb, but OneWeb was under Chapter 11, so there is no delay on our side. And you know that the great news is that OneWeb has been recovered by the UK and by Bharti, and that after discussions we have had during summer, OneWeb confirmed its very strong commitment towards Arianespace. We have signed, in fact, a contract for 16 more Soyuz on top of the 3 we have already launched. So here we were supposed to have an intense activity for OneWeb, and the project has been put on hold. So there is no consequence of what has happened in the CSG. Regarding Ariane, we were hoping to make 2 more Ariane, but the delay are not on our side. There is an Ariane which was linked to a possible contract, which may come later on. We will see. And there is an Ariane, the first one we will make at the beginning of next year, which will not be done because the satellite was not available. So it had nothing to do with the rocket. In fact, where we have had to push a little bit to the right, some customers is on Vega, because we wanted to make 4 Vegas this year and we will make 2. So we accommodate with our customer how to recover at best for this delay. But in a nutshell, I would say that apart from this situation where we will have to boost our Vega launches next year, and we will do so, I would say that fortunately the shutdown has not really triggered some delays on our side.
Thank you. Tory and Gwynne, you both seem to have, let's just say, uninterrupted access to your U.S. launch sites. I don't recall there being any closure of any duration. I'm sure you're taking additional precautions, but access to the launch site was not an issue for you in the early spring into the summer. But I'm wondering if you saw any COVID impacts in terms of customer delays in delivering their satellites to you. Tory, maybe you could address that first.
Yeah, certainly. In terms of sort of the point of integration, at a launch site, no, we really did not. What we have seen across the industry is maybe a little bit broader, and perhaps my colleagues have observed this as well. We have seen commercial missions that have delayed later out of this year because of this temporary constriction of the capital markets. In some cases, the insurance capacity that's available is insufficient. And so where commercial entities have had the freedom to do so, a couple of them have actually moved their missions out until they can achieve their insurance goals. But in terms of spacecraft not being able to get to the launch pad, no, we have not observed that in any significant way.
Yeah. Before we go to you, Gwynne, Tory, real quick follow-up on that. How long do you expect that insurance issue to remain a problem for some of your customers?
Well, I think we're already seeing the capital markets recover. So I would expect that early next year, middle of the next year at the latest, we'll see a return to normalcy in terms of the satellite customers. Now, we've also seen an impact in the launch industry on the micro launcher side. This time next year, or I should say last year, we were able to count over 120 startups for micro launchers, small rockets that would launch a single small satellite. Those, because they're startup companies, were by and large dependent on external investment. And as we look today, there is a significantly smaller number of those. And in fact, the impact has been dramatic enough, it's actually difficult to get an accurate count. I don't expect that to recover, because that market would have been grossly, like order of magnitude, oversupplied had all of those startups succeeded. There's really only room, in our judgment, for maybe 2 or 3 of these. And so although it is a little disheartening to see that investment destroyed with the exit of those companies, it's really only been an acceleration of what would have happened otherwise. And there is some silver lining in that by occurring earlier, there's probably less investment destroyed than ultimately would have. But that's a permanent change.
When SpaceX has stayed really busy this year, if compared to the rest of our guests here today, I think you've launched almost 3 times more than the rest of them combined. That said, I think 13 or 14 of those were Starlink. That's helped keep you busy. Have you seen any customer impact on your manifest this year?
We definitely have seen some customers delayed. I was unaware of any of those delays being insurance or capital related. I assumed it was just the satellite manufacturers learning how to operate in the new environment. We did have a couple of government customers delay as well. One due to COVID, and one GPS mission we actually pushed into next year because the Space Force wanted to fly on a flight-proven rocket, and so we have to get through the certification of that particular capability. Actually, I think one of the primary sources of delays for us this year has been the weather. It has been incredibly difficult finding a good weather day at Cape Canaveral. I don't know if Stéphane has seen similar, but the number of storms, the high winds, has been quite impactful to our operations.
Can we fight all together against high altitude wind? Can we make a coalition to master them?
I'm with you, Stéphane.
Me too. And something about hurricanes. We got to do something about that.
Yes. Yes.
Can we agree that we should try to end the pandemic before we try to control the weather, though? Can we? We all agree?
I don't know. Shoot high. Brian.
But yeah, so Tory, you had mentioned micro launchers, that you saw them as there being kind of a shakeout, and I know, Gwynne, you had mentioned, I think even at previous years of this conference that SpaceX had a small launch vehicle, and you don't have it anymore. But in that time, we've seen Rocket Lab gain a pretty good foothold. They've had a good year, notwithstanding a failure, but that in and of itself, they bounced back from it quickly. So they've launched 5 times with 4 successes. Do you agree with Tory, Gwynne, that there's room for maybe 2 or 3 micro launchers? Do you want to revise your prior assessments or double down on it?
I still think that the market needs to evolve. I'm not saying that in the future there isn't enough business to have a small launcher, but it's a tough business. I think I was misunderstood last fall in Paris. I don't think there's room for dozens of these, and I didn't intend to convey that there would be 0, but 0 is a possibility. I don't think there's enough room for more than 2, maybe 3 of these micro launchers until we see the space enterprise very differently.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with Gwynne. This is really a niche marketplace. The fundamental challenge the micro launchers have is the dollars per kilogram, because of the effect of scale and physics, always favor the large launch vehicles when the launch vehicle's capacity can be filled up. And the biggest markets we see right now for small spacecraft are these proliferated LEO constellations that want to go up quickly, want to go up with lots of satellites, and therefore could never afford or be practical in time to launch them one at a time. It's really a niche market for servicing of those special experiments, that kind of thing.
If I may, maybe just to complement what Gwynne and Tory have said, I think from time to time there is a real confusion between two markets. One market is the one of rideshare solutions, the one we have addressed with Vega for 53 satellites, the one SpaceX is addressing on top of its Starlink missions. This market exists. It is an exciting market. It may be for universities, for startups, for small companies, but the overall value of the market remains limited. In Arianespace, we consider that it's 200 million euro or dollars per year. It's a limited market which is existing, which we want to address with Vega, SSMS, and tomorrow with Ariane 6, a new dispenser called MLS, but it's very limited. And as Tory said, you have after a huge market, and which is made of the constellation, and the constellation are looking for big rockets. And there is sometimes a confusion because people are saying because now you have small satellites going to LEO, you need a micro launcher. It's not the case at all. You have this niche market which can be addressed by rideshare solution, and you have the mass market of constellation going to LEO and looking for heavy or very heavy launcher. And after regarding micro launcher, as you said, the only one being successful today, and it's a big success, is Electron. And what is very interesting is that if Electron as a business case, it's linked to the DoD. It's linked to the fact that the US, in their strategy for an autonomous access to space, want also to have a quick and responsive access to space and are ready to pay much more expensive, and for reasons I perfectly respect, to have this additional way of going to space. If Electron was only relying on the commercial market, I think they would have a problem of business case. So I think the question is there anywhere else in the world a space power which needs this kind of quick and responsive access to space? If the answer is yes, there could be a business case for other micro launcher. If the answer is no, it will be much more challenging. After, to be totally exhaustive on the point, if a micro launcher is a way to trigger innovation, to test, to new technologies, a new process, why not? But we must know where we are entering in, where we speak about micro launcher.
And Stéphane, if I heard you correctly, you don't foresee European defense ministries following the United States lead, willing to pay a premium for dedicated microsatellite launch?
I think I will not speak on behalf of the European DoD, so they are the one who must express themselves. But I think the question is asked to them. Do they want this additional access to space? And I think if Europe was to consider going in this direction, this is the first thing to check. Is there in Europe, do we have some customers who are ready to pay a premium for a quick and responsive access to space? Let's ask the question to our Minister for Defense.
So I'd like to
Brian,
get.
if I may. Oh,
yes, I was going to come to you next. You and Co and Cleggs. I'd like to hear how your companies are positioned to serve, let's call it the rideshare market. But Tiphaine, why don't you go ahead right now?
Yes, I agree with what Stéphane said, and perhaps it's more of a for these micro launchers, more of addressing a government need for immediate access to space, because ultimately customers that are looking at launching constellations are really focused on the reliability, how quickly can I get to space and complete my constellation, and facilitate the deployment of that constellation at a most affordable, price possible. And I think in order to do that, the micro launchers don't really address those elements. But having the ability, and so I'll use our launch vehicle family, right, of being able to use the heavy lift capability of the Proton, but then also being able to use a smaller launch vehicle such as the Soyuz can help define the strategy and the constellation deployment approach that makes the most sense for that customer based on their needs.
Thank you. Is MHI investing in the hardware you would need or developing the business relationships you would need to do dedicated rideshare missions of the sort that SpaceX has done, that Arianespace is marketing? ULA has done some piggyback rides, of course, thanks in part to the Esper ring, which has been around for a long time. And Tory can come back in with whether Vulcan's going to do dedicated rideshare. But for you, do you foresee MHI taking action to make H3 a dedicated rideshare option for the market?
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for your question. As for H2A current workforce, we do not have any such kind of rideshare or small satellite dedicated launch for H2A. But H3, we should do such kind of rideshare. And as you know, in Japan now, as Stéphane pointed out, university needs for the small satellite launch is very impending. So we are now having the very detailed discussion with Matchmaker, matching the small satellites into one big payload for the launcher. So to have their dedicated launch, potentially using the H3. So we are now preparing the such kind of small satellite launch hardware preparation, such as I should say the small satellite dispenser and the cubic satellite dispenser also. So the market we should access in the H3 era. Brian.
Thank you. Clay, let's go to you. What's your plans for, if any, for using New Glenn for dedicated rideshare?
To just start, Brian, to say, we're responding to customer demand with New Glenn, and what we see is customers asking to take advantage of our 7-meter fairing and heavy lift capability so that we can launch 30, 40, 50, 60 satellites per mission to get them into orbit quickly. So that to us is the bulk of the market, and I think Stéphane and Tory indicated that as well. That's where you make money doing these deployments for these large LEO constellations that are in some cases thousands of satellites. It used to be with the smaller ones in the mobile market, it was medium class vehicles, and now I think you're seeing the push towards much larger vehicles to deploy these constellations. With respect to rideshare, absolutely we'll have the capability to launch missions with Espa Grandes and other things where we could put capability on for smaller satellites. We're going to focus on the first side about getting our first customers into space, and then we'll take on that market segment, but that'll be a few years to come.
So rideshare has kind of evolved from being a bit of a cottage industry, a catch-as-catch-can effort to get some additional space on rockets. Now we actually have competition in this. We've seen some repeat business at SpaceX with some of the rideshare brokers. I'm wondering what the panel thinks. Is rideshare here to stay, or is this a temporary solution to a market problem? I mean, in other words, do you foresee basically taking over the rideshare brokering yourselves, cutting out the middleman, so to speak? I want to hear from Tory on this, but I definitely want to go to Gwynne first because you already have a lot of existing relationships, and SpaceX is not exactly shy about vertical integration.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, absolutely. It's here to stay. And, I'll say as evidence to that, we're seeing customers do it themselves, finding opportunistic events where they can ride share their own payloads. Aggregators will continue to be something that happens, and we will do that ourselves also. So it's kind of an all of the above. And when we, in answer to your earlier questions, yes, Vulcan will absolutely continue to do rideshare as well as multi-launch. When we were designing the new vehicle, you know, when you're doing a new space launch vehicle, you got to make some long-term bets, if you will, because they last for a decade or two, or sometimes even 3. What's the market going to be? Is it, or will there continue to be very high energy, large, dedicated spacecraft launches, or will spacecraft get smaller? Will there be only single launches, or will there be a rideshare market? And our answer was yes. And so we designed the rocket to be flexible enough to handle all of that. So yeah, Vulcan absolutely will continue.
Gwynne, before you weigh in on that, I just want to remind the audience that you can submit your questions using the question section on Swap Card. So if you have any questions, now's the time to get them in. We're coming up at the top of the hour. Go ahead and submit those questions. Gwynne?
So our experience mimics that of Tory's at ULA. We have some customers that want to come direct to us. We've had a number of successful aggregators put together, multiple satellites, even on a port. So, we're a launch business. We want to make sure that everybody that wants to get to space gets to space, and we're happy to accommodate almost any way of doing so. We can multi-manifest on some commercial missions. We've done that. We can multi-manifest on Starlink missions. I do think it's important for a dedicated rideshare capability as well. So these satellite operators can have some certainty that their missions will go as anticipated. The challenge there is that all these small sats tend to want to go to different orbits. So I do think it's going to be very important to come up with the ability to have multiple node crossings on a single launch. And we can do that to some extent with Falcon 9. It's kind of a beast of a rocket. We're looking at tugs. There's others in the market on the tug side. And then actually, I'm really excited about Starship to be able to do this as well. That's a perfect marketplace or market opportunity for Starship.
How soon do you see one of these in-space transportation solutions actually flying? Are we going to see it in 2021, or do you think we have to wait at least until 2022?
I think you'll see them in 2021. Yep.
All right. So, Gwynne, SpaceX is not just a launch company; it's also a satellite company. Does that have any bearing on how hard you might go after a competing constellation, something like Telesat LEO? That's a competition I suspect we'll see fairly soon if they order their satellites. Does that give you any pause? Do you have to think about it strategically, whether you want to go after that and help them get their satellites up?
We don't have to take a pause on that. We were founded as a launch company. And we will continue to launch customers. I would love to get Dan Goldberg's business and Telesat's business to launch their constellation and others as well.
Clay, obviously Blue Origin is structured as a merchant supplier, while Jeff Bezos owns the company, and Kuiper is owned by Amazon, publicly traded company. At the same time, is there any potential here for Kuiper to help keep New Glenn busy during kind of downturns in the standard commercial market, same way that we're seeing Falcon keep really busy thanks to its own proprietary project?
Thanks for the question, Brian. Well, I've explained this. I've tried to explain this before that Amazon is a publicly traded company. We are a privately held company. We have completely different missions, and so we're excited about what they're doing. We hope to launch satellites for them. It's an incredible constellation that they're looking to deploy, and so there's going to be a lot of business there to go after. And so I won't comment on any competitions or things that are going on there, but we're excited about that business case. And we too, I think, what Gwynne said, just on our side, we've had announced contracts with Telesat. We're a merchant supplier of launch services. We hope that there's other constellations out there that will be signing in the near future. And so we think this is the most dynamic part of a segment of the market right now.
Thank you, Clay. Why you're on, there's a few other questions I want to get to, but obviously one of the broader topics here is the transition to new vehicles. It concerns where we are with the market. But we're waiting for the BE4 engine. I think Tory needs a production qualified engine in order to meet his early 2021 was the last estimate I saw for when Vulcan's going to fly. That's around the corner. So Clay, I'll start with you. When will ULA get the engine it needs to make that debut?
Sure. So I'll let Tory talk to the specifics of the Vulcan program. By the way, we're a proud supplier to them. We were really looking forward to delivering high quality engines for use by Vulcan and supporting their launches, particularly for the national security community out there. As I mentioned, I think in my opening remarks, BE4 has made great progress. We're starting qualification at the end of this year. We're going to work very hard to make sure that Tory has the engines that he needs to fly Vulcan. And then separately, we're going to be flying BE4s on the New Glenn program. So it's a main priority for us right now.
Yeah,
Thank you. Can you put a month on the, what month do you have on your calendar for making the rocket?
Was that a question for me? Sorry, Brian.
Yes. Just looking for a little more specific than early 2021. That's where you guys were in the spring, but now that we're just a couple months away from the changeover to the new year, I'm hoping we can get a little more fidelity on what you're aiming for.
My customer is developing a new spacecraft. And so our goal and what we will do is to have the rocket ready to go and not allow them to be waiting on us, because that's how we want to work in the launch industry. Their launch date is actually their launch date, and I'm not going to, speak for them. So I would ask you to find an opportunity to direct that question to Astrobotic. I'll let them talk to it. We're still planning to have the rocket ready in plenty of time. We're going to fly him next year. We're very happy with Clay's engine. It is performing better than we anticipated. It is basically finished and entering into production. We're very pleased with the amount of testing that has been done on it. I think the folks who are listening to our panel know that one of our very important priorities is the reliability of our launch vehicles, now at 140 in a row, knock on wood. We want to continue that streak. And so we have been very pleased with the development approach that Blue Origin has taken, so that we get lots and lots of minutes and hours and many articles on the test stand, so that we know that engine is going to be reliable when we put it underneath the Vulcan.
Thank you. So it was no surprise that we were going to enter a period where the number of commercial launches to be performed, there was going to be a little air in the pipeline. And that all goes back to what was happening with GeoComSat orders. If you go back in 2017, 2018, last year we rebounded, I think, with 15 orders. That's more than the previous 2 years combined. This year, as some of you mentioned, has been a relatively good year with 13 C-band orders. 13 of the 17 satellites ordered were because of the C-band windfall. I want to hear where you guys see this market headed. I mean, will annual orders remain in the teens? Will revert back to single digits? And maybe Stéphane, do you want to speak to that? I know that's a big piece of your market. Where do you see it headed?
Yes, definitely. So this year we recover on the GTO market after 3 years, which have been very, very low. But it is true that it is partly made by the C-band opportunity. You have mentioned 13 C-band satellites out of 20 satellites ordered to industry. Here, I do not speak about launch service provider. I speak about a satellite manufacturer. So it is a rebound, but part of this rebound is made to the very specific situation of the C-band. For the coming years, we expect more the market to be approximately at 15 satellites per year. And it will be a very changing market because we are leaving the world of the classical small satellite, big satellites, 3 tons, 6 tons. We will have stack solutions, the one, for instance, which are promoted by Airbus or Thales. We will have a very large spacecraft, 6 tons, 7 tons, 8 tons, 9 tons. We will have more limited projects. So overall, the GTO market will be, I think, in value, maybe, or in volume, 2/3 of what it has been during the very good years from 2005 to 2015, to 25 to 2015. And after, you will have much more diversity in this market, which is also a consequence of electric propulsion.
Gwynne, do you have any insight? How many GEO ComSat orders do you expect to be put out for bid for launches in 2021?
I think the operators are better suited for that. I don't anticipate double digits next year. I will be happy to be surprised, however, for GeoComSat launches. Yeah.
Thank you, Tiphaine. I want to ask you. This is a project. This is a contract you inherited, but there was Intelsat and Eutelsat has a multi-launch agreement with ILS. I'm wondering if there's any danger of that expiring without actually being used. If some of those launches will be back out in the open market for some of your friends here today to bid for.
Well, I will answer that. I think if I may go back on just a couple of points on the reliability of the engine, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out there too on, until the B4 is ready to power the Vulcan, our Russian industry partners are happy to continue supplying the RD-180 to power the Atlas V, which is, the workhorse of and reliable of engines. Also wanted to point out as we talked about development of future launch vehicles, the involvement of the government is important. Certainly on our end, the Russian space industry definitely drives those developments. We have much more of an opportunity today to provide input on the needs of the commercial market, but they're the ones, the Russian government spending the money and the time on these lengthy programs, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, and they also have helped stabilize, as we talked about, the needs of the market and the commercial market in the future. And I agree with the Stéphane and Gwynne's assessment on that. And I'm hopeful that, we'll see more than less, but what I do think is we'll definitely see more diverse needs. The standard traditional ComSat GEOs that we've seen, there'll be more small GEOs and GSOs, LEO, things like that we've talked about. But the government really helps enable the stability in the launch cadence. And we have 20 or so Proton and Angar launches planned in the next 2 to 3 years, and 50 plus Soyuz launches. So it does help ride that wave, if you will, of commercial demand. The short answer to your question is not if I can help it. So that's not the plan.
Tiphaine, if I wanted to buy a Soyuz launch, and to be clear, I don't. But if I did,
too bad. We could sell you one.
If I did, is ILS the only game in town for launching a Soyuz either from Kourou or from Baikonur, or is Arianespace still marketing that? Could you explain briefly whether we're having a changing of the guard on the marketing of that rocket?
So absolutely, I can't speak, to the agreement arrangements that Arianespace has with Roscosmos, and that's certainly a question for Stéphane. What I can tell you, as I mentioned earlier in the panel, is that we now have the ability, ILS, jointly now has the ability with GK Launch Services to offer Soyuz flights out of the Russian spaceports. So I guess I'd tell you to call me first, but if you want to fly out of Kourou, I would suggest you call Stéphane.
Stéphane, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yes, well, I think the situation is quite easy. We do not have the exclusivity anymore of the sales and marketing of Soyuz. So Glavkosmos can also sell some Soyuz. This is a fact. For sure, when it comes to selling Soyuz for Guyana launch, it's only Arianespace. And when it comes to promoting Soyuz for Russian spaceport, we can promote it, or Glavkosmos can make it. After, see what has happened recently, we have confirmed with OneWeb 16 Soyuz in September. So let's consider that Arianespace remains a very powerful channel to promote this nice launcher.
Thank you. So we've got some audience questions in the few minutes we have left here. The question is, what do you think of Chinese satellite launchers as commercial competitors? Ko, I'd like to start with you. Do you foresee any competition from Chinese launchers?
Actually, in commercial market, we do not have experience to compete with Chinese launches for the commercial or satellite launch. And I think, so from our point of view, Chinese launch vehicle is not our competitor at this point of time.
Does anybody on the panel see it as a competitor for commercial launches? I didn't think a ULA or SpaceX would. Pretty tough, but Tiphaine, do you have any potential to go after some of the same customers?
I think in some instances we do, yes.
And so how much of a competitive of threat do you see these new launch vehicles?
I think our competition is on this panel right here today.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So we just got through an election here in the United States. Elections have policy consequences. Does anybody in the panel foresee any policy changes from the Biden administration that could affect demand for your company's launch services? Let's start with the U.S. Defense Department's two primary launchers. Tory, I'll go to you first.
No, we don't really anticipate a change in demand, a change in priorities, a change in missions. For example, the Biden campaign early on put out a policy statement on space and talked about a shifting of emphasis, for example, in science towards climate monitoring and climate research. So different missions, but not necessarily a significant impact to those of us in the launch industry.
Gwynne, do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, the only possibility would be maybe setting the sites for the lunar exploration and human landing there to be slightly later than 2024. I know that was a long shot to begin with. I think it would be great if we could continue to work towards that. But they may want to provide more time prior to landing humans on the moon again.
So with the changing of the guard, you sometimes have a shift in policy priorities, or folks who felt like they got their ox gored might push in another direction. Here I'm talking about proliferated LEO. It's a very disruptive to the marketplace mode of operation. Do either of you have any thoughts about whether P-LEO will survive a change in administration? Is that kind of baked in enough that there's going to be some shift to that kind of architecture? Maybe Tory, we'll go back to you.
Sure. Yeah, I anticipate the government will still be interested in a proliferated LEO because of the fundamental nature of the difficulty in coping with threats into LEO. Very easy access to LEO from Earth's surface in the form of an attack, or from Earth orbit. The timelines are very short. It's very difficult to protect an asset that is in LEO. And so a proliferated constellation is one of the many tools required that can provide some resiliency and robustness to a constellation that is networked together for comms or for precision navigation in the event, God forbid, of a conflict that extends into space. Therefore, I anticipate there'll continue to be some interest in that no matter what.
Okay, very good. We got one more here. This DoD has ordered 3 missions to date under NSSL Phase 2. This is a ULA and SpaceX question, obviously. ULA will conduct 2 Vulcan launches in FY22 for $337 million total. Do I have that right, or U-316? And SpaceX will conduct 1 Falcon 9 mission that year for $316 million. So the question for Gwynne is, why is that one launch so expensive?
So the launch was not that expensive. The Phase 2 awards had a number of components to it. Some was the individual launches themselves, but a large part for us certainly was the infrastructure that needed to get put in place in order to support the entire set of requirements. I need a long fairing, I need West Coast heavy, I need a vertical integration. So that $300 million does not reflect one launch, it reflects mostly the infrastructure that I need to put in place there. Yeah.
Is all that infrastructure cost reflected in that one launch, or are we going to see an additional upcharge, if you will, on your additional awards? Do you follow my question?
No, I'm sorry.
Are you covering all your costs, like vertical integration, West Coast heavy? Is all that now baked into that first award that you've gotten under NSSL?
No, that's an annual amount. So there will be, although it was very front loaded because the Space Force wants to see that capability deployed. If actually you look at what was awarded under LSA plus what was awarded under phase 2, we actually got less. So you got to put those two together actually to get the total that the Space Force is investing in the launch industry in the United States.
You're referring to the 40-60 split that the Space Force did for the awards, or just total dollar value?
I'm sorry, there was an award that was granted in November of 2018 to help get the U.S. launch providers put into a place where they can be competitive for phase 2.
Right.
We did not win one of those awards. And so basically all the money that that we needed to spend to get there, we needed to put into our phase 2 award. And I was happy that we were so competitive.
So that makes sense. Your 3 competitors for that competition, they all had hundreds of millions of dollars of assistance, either working with the rocket or any other infrastructure specifics. But Tory, this style makes it very unclear to me. I know that Vulcan, one of its main priorities is to be competitive with SpaceX on price. What does this tell us? What does this tell the market about where you are when you come to market?
Well, it tells the market exactly what it told us, which is that we were surprised at just how price competitive we were. We were the lowest price bidder overall for the entire block of missions. And although everything Gwynne said was accurate, I would not want her to be misunderstood. This is a firm fixed price contract for launch services. Development is not part of it from the government's point of view. If a provider has to do development because they were unsuccessful in other competitions, that's an issue that they have to deal with on their side of that fence. But before I leave that, we're almost to the end of this panel, and I would hate to be remiss in not having had the opportunity to congratulate Tiphaine on her new role.
Yes, congratulations, Tiphaine. When we started the year, it looked like that was a big turning point for ILS, and then obviously COVID happened, impacts everybody's biz dev efforts. You want to have some parting words on that, and then we'll kind of wrap this one up? I guess not. So I want to thank everybody. I wish we could go on because obviously there's more questions and we didn't get to them, but it's great to have these opportunities to hear from the world's leading launch providers. I'm asked to remind you that after this session, we're heading into break until 5:30 p.m. CET. Do I have that correct for anybody who's in that time zone? Because don't rely on me for that, but we're heading into a break period. I'm sure our host today will let you know when we have to come back on. But once again, thanks very much. Thanks for joining us. Thanks everybody for being here. Stay safe. Hope to see you all soon in person.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you so much.